Good morning, everybody, and welcome to our Fireside Chat. Today I'm joined by Dr. Charlotte Keating, who's a psychologist with a PhD in neuroscience, specialising in adolescents and executives. She's a passionate advocate for mental health, particularly for young people. Charlotte is a member of the Australian Psychology Society and an associate member of the College of Clinical Psychologists. She is uniquely placed as a result of her expertise in psychology and neuroscience to understand the needs of young people and adults and effectively communicate about them as a media personality, psychologist, and also a researcher. She's a member of the National Centre Against Bullying, an initiative of the Ilana and Madeline Foundation that aims to keep young people safe in the community. And she's on the advisory board for Dolly's Dream, an advisor to the Ilana and Madeline Foundation. Good morning, Charlotte, and a very warm welcome to you today. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Anne.
We were reflecting on this sort of before we kicked off, just when we first met, and Charlotte was one of the very first people that I brought into the Saxton family. So we had a great chat down in a coffee shop in South Melbourne on a beautiful sunny day.
It was a beautiful sunny day.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit about you and what you wanted to be when you were little and when you grew up.
Well, I liked this question, Anne, that you're sort of posing, because really it wasn't psychology to begin with. I sort of had an idea in mind of being a musician one day, and I think it probably stemmed from when I used to go and visit my grandparents. They'd always have classical music sort of floating in the background, and I really associated that with visiting them. And, you know, now I sort of love all sort of genres of music and how it makes me feel. But when I was at school, I studied the flute really for many, many years, and ended up doing my associate in music and VCE. Wow. So it was a real contender, actually.
Yeah, right. A flute, not an easy instrument to learn either.
No. It wasn't, but it was beautiful, and you know, I do love playing. So yeah, music I think was the early start.
Right, very good. And how did you end up doing what you're actually doing now, and where did things start for you in terms of sort of having that shift from music into psychology?
Well, and that sort of, I guess, related to a childhood friend of mine. When I was still at school, we lost this friend to suicide, actually. And that was probably the moment that I really became aware of wanting to understand what was going on, more so in teenage years, and really wanting to help. I went and sort of took quite a long road to being a psychologist, in that I studied neuroscience and, you know, did research for really quite a long time, because I was just vastly interested in the brain and, you know, why we think the way we do and why we do the things we do. But I would say that my heart's always been quite tethered to that early experience of loss, and really wanting to help at a time when I think young people really need it most. And I think that's probably got a lot to do with why I'm really passionate about working with adolescents too.
Yeah, right. So really a really significant life-changing moment for you in terms of your career. And I'm assuming that was all about sort of then moving forward and helping people to make sure that potentially that didn't happen again to somebody else.
It's still, you know, a really tragic and huge problem in our society. Yeah. But definitely for me back then, I really felt this initial awareness that I hadn't had before about, you know, this can actually happen. And a real sort of passion, I guess, for wanting to, you know, ultimately now really help to sort of empower young people to be able to help them find their agency, you know, and be a real collaborator in their journeys in that way.
Yeah, right. Fantastic. And so for you at the moment, maybe even pre-COVID and post-COVID, what does sort of an average day look like for you?
Well, I am a creature of habit. Yep. No, it is quite an average day, really.
Right.
You know, I will probably start the day most days with like a run or a walk. I did a lot of competitive sport when I was a kid, and sort of now as an adult, exercise is what I've worked out is a really important part of calibrating, my mindset for the day ahead. So, the walk or the run could involve really tuning into nature and just being really present, or it could be me really thinking about what is happening in the day ahead. Some mornings I absolutely can't be bothered, and so it will be the incentive of a post-run coffee that'll, get me through, or I just won't do it. But after that, I would, typically prepare for sessions for the day. It might be a webinar or a talk or something. And then towards the end of the day, that'll be when I check emails and respond to messages and those sorts of things, and send out reminders for the day ahead before clocking off.
Yeah, right. And so nothing's really changed in terms of your routine in terms of COVID-19?
Things that have changed for me are probably the little things. Okay. So, I work from home now and do mainly video and telephone-based sessions. Yep. So I do actually miss going to work and seeing people face to face. And just, that sort of element of routine and being in a different environment. I think I'm quite sort of sensitive to really enjoying that sort of shift up and change in things. Yeah. Whether you're going to sort of schools or, being fortunate to go to other places. We're not doing that so much at the moment, and it's had its benefits, but I've also, changed my routine accordingly and probably slowed down, I think, quite a bit as well, without so much travel and those sorts of things. Yeah,
right. Yeah, awesome. And as you were growing up, what was sort of some of the best advice that you were ever given, and what impact did it have on you in terms of where you are and who you are today?
Good question. Some advice I do remember getting was actually when I was at an early career crossroads, and I'd done research into sort of neuroscience and things for quite some time, and I really did want to study psychology, but psychology to get into in a postgraduate sense is actually quite competitive. Right. It was then, and it certainly is now, and so I was thinking to myself, I really need a plan B if I don't get in. And I went and actually spoke to a friend's late father who was incredibly generous with his time, and he listened to how passionate I was about mental health and about science, and his advice at that point was to really stay my path and to stay the course and persist. And I did, and I think that advice has sort of rung true in my mind at sort of many moments throughout the years. And I think for me, reflecting on that, it's probably a good example of how mentors and people who give us advice in life are not necessarily those who are consistent and always there. We can have, experiences that allow us to cross paths with certain people, especially if we're, open to those sorts of opportunities. And advice can come at interesting times and very poignant times, and that was one for me.
Yeah, fantastic. So, we've been sort of hearing a lot in the news and everything, great news, kids are sort of going to head back to school. So sort of, I certainly know within my team that there are a lot of the team that are really excited about the fact that, they don't have to homeschool and kids are going to go back to school.
Yep.
It will mean sort of a whole change in routine for families and for kids, and it will mean an adjustment for kids going back to school. And what would your advice be for families that are now sort of transitioning through this? Okay, you've been at home, you've been homeschooling, you've probably had a little bit of leniency and things have not been quite so disciplined and routined. So how do we transition back into school?
Yeah, look, I think, and there's a couple of things that I think apply universally for most families, and then for other families there's a few sort of individual differences to consider. Something that I think is quite universal is that many people's sleep routine has shifted. It might be that they're going to sleep a little bit later and they're also waking up in the morning a little bit later. Yeah. And when you're coming off the school holidays, usually you have to recalibrate that sort of sleep cycle a little bit. Yeah. This is no different to that, except that most kids probably haven't felt like they've had a holiday, and I don't think parents will have felt like they've had much of a holiday. Correct. Either. Yeah. I think there's been, so much change that everybody's had to adjust to.
Yep.
You know, for parents being able to commit to working from home as well as supporting the learning and education needs of kids at home
Yep.
has really, you know, stretched many. Everyone's doing their absolute best, but it's been a stretch, and for kids too, especially in primary school, having to learn online and in quite a self-directed way, where they don't have the teachers answering the questions perhaps as they might usually, and coping with what it feels like to sit with, you know, the frustration of it sometimes too, I think has been a really, you know, challenging experience for many kids. There's also been some wonderful opportunities, though, I think, for being able to be a bit more self-directed, to choose when they learn and the kind of schedules that they do it on. And so all of these things, you know, allow them a little bit of independence and agency, but at the same time, heading back to school means another shift in all of these patterns. So sleep is the first routine that I would start with addressing. If the kids have pushed their routine out even a couple of hours, which is actually quite a lot, they may feel a bit of jet lag, literally, when they start to return to their normal sleep cycle. I'd also ask kids and sort of talk about as a family how you feel about going back to school. Some parents are genuinely a little bit sort of I guess a little bit anxious about returning to social interaction and what that might look like. Have discussions about that. I think that because it has been a difficult time for many kids, there may be some difficulties in terms of you know, motivation to learn, general tiredness. That can sometimes translate into friendship challenges and things because, you know, kids are tired. So just looking out for that and being aware of those things, I think, is important. You know, depending on how you talk about it in your family, you might sort of start a dinner time conversation where you know, mum or dad or whomever it might be might say, oh, you know, look, the toughest thing in my day today was, you know, this particular issue, and this is how I went about dealing with it. The best thing was you know, this that happened, and then asking the kids to sort of, you know, go around the table and do the same. And if you model that sort of in a fairly safe and usual way, it usually makes kids feel quite comfortable with letting you know what's going on for them. And I think it's a really good time before kids go back to school to have conversations about safety in terms of online behaviour, but also, you know, bullying and things that may have happened as well, because what we do know with the lockdown period is that kids have been spending you know, a lot more time online and connected to technology, which I think has been a really good thing in the most part. It's helped them, you know, to meet their developmental needs socially, for entertainment, and also, you know, for education. But just by virtue of spending a lot more time online, there's been the opportunity, you know, for a real surge, as the, you know, the research shows, in cyberbullying behaviour. So just checking in with your kids and asking them and perhaps being aware of their behaviour or changes. You know, things like not wanting to let you know what they're doing on their phones, perhaps being a little bit more socially withdrawn, not looking forward to going back to school. You know, perhaps some grumpiness or irritability that's unusual, is important to check in on, so you can have some conversations to sort of elucidate, well, what has been going on with their friendships at the moment? Are they feeling confident and safe to head back to school, or have there been some challenges that they've been dealing with over this period of time that you can, you know, get to the bottom of and help them manage? And of course, there's, you know, a lot of really good resources that parents can tap into at the moment. Evidence-based resources are really important to consider. Places like, you know, obviously the association I have with the Alana and Madeline Foundation, the National Centre Against Bullying, Dolly's Dream Parent Hub, all of these have wonderful fact sheets. If you're a parent that's wanting to have a conversation or start a conversation about online safety, doing the DigiPledge from Dolly's Dream can be a really good family-based downloadable questionnaire to do.
Great
and of course there's the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner that's got more specific information also about reporting these things too. So yeah, it's a good time to have these conversations and check in and sort of do refreshers on different, you know, fact sheets and questionnaires that are available.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
A couple of things. So, as the sort of families transition back to school, one of the things that so many people I've spoken to has been very much around, they've really enjoyed the time they've been having as a family, and all of a sudden, you have access to both your parents that potentially you didn't have before. And in the majority of cases, that's great. There are certainly families that are challenged by that as well. But how, in terms of making sure you sort of maintain that, because I'm sure that's a really good thing for a family unit, what would be some strategies for a family moving forward to make sure they maintain that sort of connection so that you can have the conversations that you're talking about now?
Absolutely, Anne, and it's something that I've noticed in quite a few of the conversations I've been having with people is really, we live such busy, fast-paced lives where there's just so much going on, and if perhaps you might have a child or multiple children at home, it's pretty normal to have lots of extracurricular activities that mean you're doing things after school, maybe even before school, and certainly on the weekends. So this lockdown period for many has sort of been like a forced time out, if you like, from that kind of busyness, and has really allowed for that kind of bonding and that connection and that presence that I don't think we typically have the time to enjoy otherwise. I think it's a really good opportunity to check in with the family and have a conversation about what are the sorts of activities that you are doing, and genuinely ask, hey, are they contributing to your quality of life? Do you like doing those? What's a pros and cons list about them? Do you want to return to how everything was as soon as you can? Or would you actually prefer to return to or create a bit of a hybrid model, if you like, that allows more downtime and connecting and being present? It's sort of like an opportunity, I guess, for a reset, whatever that might look like for each family. But it's a great idea.
And then for kids going back to school, so there potentially be some kids that are going back to school that have either were in the middle of transitioning into a new school, maybe have started a new school a little bit later, was just starting to sort of establish a bit of a friendship group, and then had that potentially sort of ripped away from them. What's your advice to families who kids are going back and are probably anxious about whether or not that friendship group that they'd started to form was still going to be there? What does that look like for a family, and how do you support them?
It's a really important question, Anne. And my advice would be to check in with the teachers and to check in potentially with the wellbeing people at the school, so that they can create some opportunities where they exist for, cultivating friendships, but also providing a really safe space for that young person to go if they are struggling and they're just needing a little bit of downtime with someone who can support and understand. So I think, when you feel a bit isolated or disconnected at school, to feel safe and to feel like you're okay, you just really need someone to understand and connect with you and feel like you can get some help with that. Don't be afraid to chat with teachers and chat with the wellbeing people to create that kind of safety for them.
And then what do you think, this is probably a really hard question to answer, but what do you think our new normal life will be like as we sort of transition out of COVID-19? We were talking a little bit before about the potential mental health challenges that will come out of this. And interesting, you were saying that there hadn't been an increase, is that right?
At the moment, I think the reports are that there's been actually a decrease initially in the expected uptake of services, but the expectation is that moving forward there will be an increase, and that the next curve that we do need to really manage is that related to mental health. And
so what is sort of a new normal going to look like, do you think?
Well, I think it's hard to say at this point in time, except that I think there will be probably some people who have really enjoyed and found convenient the opportunity for doing, therapy in a video-based way. That's something I can definitely sort of speak to, is that many people like that. Many people are looking forward to returning to face-to-face sorts of sessions. Look, I think, many Australians will, be able to bounce back from what we have experienced. At the same time, there's also many Australians who will genuinely struggle because of the social and the economic impact of COVID. And these are the people that we really need to take care of and look out for. You might be, somebody who is in a position to help, or you might know that someone is struggling. But even if you don't know that they're struggling, really check in the weeks and months ahead with people to make sure they're okay, because it is going to be a really challenging time moving forward. The government has, through their National Health Program or plan, made available funding, to get that sort of help. And I guess for many people who, if COVID were not the case, they may not have found themselves experiencing really high levels of stress or perhaps, signs of mental ill health. But know that, you are doing your best and that it's okay to reach out and to ask for that help when you need it, because we've all gone through this and it is really difficult for so many, and the help is there.
Yeah. One of the things that we talked about when we were just catching up pre this was all about, pausing for reflection and looking at quality of life markers. And I actually really went away and reflected on that, actually, sort of the pause and reflection. And there are a number of things that, even I'm doing now that I wasn't doing pre-COVID that I really want to maintain. So I think that it is actually a really good time to reflect and have that moment in time in terms of what are the quality of life markers that you're currently enjoying and how do you maintain that, because you can kind of see that, maybe there will be a light at the end of the tunnel, and you can almost see in your own mind that you're going to fall back into sort of old habits, So how do you actually pause and go, I'm going to commit to this and I'm going to make sure that that continues?
Yep.
Yeah.
So, Anne, it's interesting, I think, what many people have probably experienced by virtue of this forced slowdown and the simplicity of life in many ways that we have found ourselves experiencing is actually an awareness that we've not really had before. Sometimes, if you engage in mindfulness and meditation, you might know what it is to be really present and focused with your attention on what you might be doing. And I think inadvertently a lot of people have probably been finding themselves quite mindful. And I think it's the little things that allow us to remain quite anchored, in that present moment. It might be, for example, having a friend over for dinner and really taking that extra time to set the table and prepare it nicely and, pick some flowers perhaps from the garden. I was about to say the park, but you shouldn't do that. From the garden, just to make those small moments, really lovely and connected. I think a lot of people within families, as well as with friends as well, have just found the time to really connect authentically with each other in a really grounded and calm way. And I think being able to almost take that slow and steadiness of our deliberateness in our interactions and our connection with each other, but also ourselves, being able to realise, oh, hey, when I listen to that music, I feel really good. Or I went for that walk this morning with the dog and that was just so lovely. Or, I went for a walk with a friend and I just enjoyed that so much. Creating the space and the time to do those really life-affirming things. Whether it's listening to podcasts more often than you would normally, just taking those little moments and those details into life moving forward.
Yeah, fantastic. What advice would you have for families that have been through sort of more challenges than others, whether that's financial or they have children with disabilities or learning challenges? What advice would you have for those families today?
Yeah, and look, I think it's been incredibly difficult for some families, in particular too, because with how quickly everything changed, there's just not been a runway to prepare for the circumstances that they're in, be it financial or be it finding themselves managing work and schooling and supporting kids that may have extra needs. So I think what's really important, in addition to hopefully the help that the government can provide, is connecting with friends, connecting with supports, allowing people who can help you to genuinely help, but also too, in amongst the stress of everything, finding the opportunities to really engage in self-care and self-compassion, because being able to do that and to try and to the best of your capacity, find some calm will help you to be resilient in navigating what is a genuinely very stressful time.
Yep.
And hopefully a temporary time where things do genuinely pick up and move forward in a better way, sooner rather than later for many.
Yeah, okay. If you have any questions for Charlotte, now is the time just to pop them in the chat box for us. What do you enjoy most about what you currently do?
I think for me, I'm really lucky to have found my passion and my purpose. I get to speak to people about their challenges and their vulnerabilities, and in particular, I get to try and help empower, young people to feel like they have agency, to
Yep.
engage with their strengths and be able to deal with some of, the most challenging experiences they might have. And I feel really lucky and fortunate to be able to do that. And I feel really, fortunate to do that with my days.
Yeah, very important work. Tell us a little bit of the work that you're doing for Dolly's Dream and maybe the Alana and Madeline Foundation.
Look, I'm really fortunate to be associated with organisations that I'm really passionate about, who represent, causes that are very close to my heart. With Dolly's Dream, we work really hard to empower parents and educate parents about bullying and cyberbullying and how to keep their kids safe.
Yep.
I work lots on the resources that are there on the Parent Hub, along with, the really passionate team that works really hard at Dolly's Dream to provide those resources and fact sheets. At the Alana and Madeline Foundation, they're incredible. They work so hard to keep children safe from violence in the community. They're working tirelessly at the moment, and their associated organisation, the National Centre Against Bullying, who also work really hard to provide information for families in order to keep kids safe. And there's some really, fundamental organisations working for young people in our community, along with, many other wonderful organisations out there as well.
Yeah, fantastic. I'm just going to sort of go back to school and kids and maybe just touch on teachers a little bit. So teachers have had to sort of, probably out of everybody, and as much as this word has been used so much in the last 8 weeks, they've really had to pivot.
Yep.
Right? And they've had to deliver content online, and now they're sort of pivoting back to actually deliver content back into the schoolroom, let alone how do you manage a schoolroom of kids from a social distancing perspective, because very hard to do with young kids, and everybody will be so excited to see their friends and everything that goes with that. How do you think teachers are feeling? And, as they transition through this, there's probably a sense of anxiety, but also a sense of relief.
Look, I think I can probably speak, from afar and also quite directly in terms that, I think from many teachers actually that, I've had the opportunity to talk to over the weeks, it's been an extraordinary effort to prepare and deliver content, again with no runway for being able to prepare for it. They've really just been quite extraordinary in what they've managed, and so many of them have really taken the time and the care to chat with families and students about how they're coping and managing the shift. They've been flexible where they've needed to be flexible, but really they are just doing such an outstanding job and working so hard. I imagine that some of them are really relieved at the idea of being able to do face-to-face teaching, as I think so many students are relieved to be able to go back to that too.
Yep.
But yeah, look, I hope that all teachers are sort of applying the same approach of self-care and self-compassion, because they're doing at least 2 jobs in one at the moment in terms of the turnaround with delivery, and they're quite extraordinary. I think one of the other things I mentioned before, that it would be good for families with their kids going back to school to check in with their teachers if they're worried about their kids, and sort of friendship groups and being able to sort of reconnect them. It's also a really good idea for kids to be able to hang out with a few friends before they do head back to school, and to create opportunities either for a kick of the footy in the park or whatever it might be, just to kind of give them that social contact and connection again prior to going back. It will make them feel a bit sort of more safe and like they've got a buddy to head back to school with. And even if there isn't someone perhaps at the school that they'd be comfortable doing that with, even their friends from their old school, just to make them feel a bit more confident and a bit more connected prior to going back usually helps.
Okay. We have a question for you. Do you have any suggestions for primary school kids that have been bullied pre-COVID, and what coping mechanisms they could apply coming back to school?
Look, it really does depend on the circumstances for what happened, but what I would be advising anybody is to really understand from their child's perspective what actually happened in a really calm and gentle way, elucidate what went on. With that information, you're then in a position to do something about it. You know, websites like the Office of the E-Safety Commissioner have very straightforward instructions, as does the National Centre Against Bullying, about how to approach bullying in relation to school, to collect the evidence, how to, you know, sort of deal with it, but really give your young person a sense that with what they tell you, you're going to do something about it. You're going to help them and you're going to facilitate a resolution of this with the school so that they feel safe rather than scared and unsure about heading back to school. Because what we do know is that when kids are scared at school and worried about, you know, their peers, they're often sitting in class and not actually focusing on what the teacher might be teaching or learning, you know, to their true capacity or potential, because they're worried about what might be going on with the person in the row behind or at recess or at lunchtime. So definitely do have those really kind, calm conversations so you can work it through.
Okay. Tell us, what's your favourite book? What's a top book? What would you recommend from a reading perspective for our community?
I would definitely, and this I have to give a disclaimer, this person is a friend of mine, and you know, a book that I commented in as well, but Claire Bowditch's book, Your Own Kind of Girl, is the most honest, brave memoir that sort of describes the human condition and our capacity for resilience, and it is just so utterly uplifting, and she is just so brave and wonderful. So I would definitely be recommending that book to anyone who hasn't read it and is looking for a really real and compassionate story that's just fabulous.
Okay. I'll read it. I'm also really mindful of the time. So final question for today, Charlotte. Name one thing that you will never take for granted again post-COVID.
Oh, and I think probably the obvious one that I talk with lots of people about is like being able to give somebody a hug. But I think, you know, even more than that, probably like the idea of being around people or just carelessly walking into a really busy room full of people and not thinking twice about it. I think, you know, that's a pretty weird one. And so that one.
So true. Dr. Charlotte Keating, thank you so much for joining us today. Really appreciate it. Incredibly insightful. So much content to help families today. So really appreciate it. Thanks
for having me, Anne. Thanks.
Pleasure.